Hi, I'm Randall from Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab, providing tips on language learning, culture, and human development. And one of the topics, well, the topic of the broadcast today is about motivating hearts and minds during difficult times. I think we've all experienced difficulties throughout our lives. And I think we would all speak to the idea of having courage to learn, to grow, are real essential parts of all of our experiences. And one of the things as we speak about this, we're going to speak about vulnerability, authenticity, and belonging, because a lot of people feel, no, if I have a challenge in my particular life, I'm going to keep that secret. I'm not going to share that with others because that might be a sign of weakness. But I find that true belonging, true courage comes from being vulnerable, from being authentic, and finding purpose and belonging. And one of my favorite authors is Brené Brown. She is a researcher at the University of Houston in the United States. She's an expert on courage, vulnerability, and shame. And one of the things that she's done in 2010, she gave a TED Talk. It's been viewed over 53 million times, talking about rising strong in difficulties, at being open and having the courage to do difficult things. And I think that's what we like to address today. So the idea today is talking about motivating minds and hearts during difficult times. And that's what we'd like to address. So what I'd like to do right now is bring on my guest, Elaine Oliveira. And Elaine,
Hello.
welcome to the broadcast once again.
Thank you, Randall. Hello, everyone. Hello, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. We're really glad you're here. Please join us and share your thoughts.
And I think that's what we try to do, Elaine, is we try to share thoughts. And in this particular broadcast, where we're talking about challenges in our lives, I don't know about you, Elaine, but many times, no. You haven't earned the right to hear my story. You haven't earned the right to know the problems that we have experienced. And what we're going to be doing is I have selected a number of quotes on courage, about growth, about learning. And we would like, of course, to hear everyone's voice out there. What are their experiences? How have you found the courage to do things that are really difficult? And so, Elaine, I've invited you to share your own personal experiences as well as the experiences of those that are watching today. So let's just with that in mind, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself for those that might not know you, and then we'll go from there.
All right, well, I'm Elaine Oliveira. I'm an English teacher here. I live in Brazil, right? I've been teaching for 18 years now, and I've learned English in the US in Washington, D.C., and then I just fell in love with the language and professionalized myself. And my true inspiration and what keeps me going through the hardest times are these two little guys here. Not so little, right? Matthews, who's 17, my oldest son, and Lucas, who is 15, my youngest son. And they are really my sunshine through dark days.
All right. And thank you for sharing. And again, we have other people joining us. Jorge from Mexico. Again, nice. Layla. And Layla says, hi, Elaine. That's
hello,
wonderful.
Layla.
And Junior, hello from Brazil.
Hello.
Someone you know?
Yeah. That's, in fact, an Instagram follower. Hi, Wilson.
All right. And it's wonderful to see different voices of people sharing and joining in the conversation. So let's get right into the broadcast, Elaine. And as people look at the particular topic, we're addressing motivating hearts and minds during difficult times. And what I'd like to do, Elaine, and we were talking about this in preparation for the broadcast, is including other voices, other teachers that are out there, students, whoever might be watching, about some of the challenges they have. And we're going to get a little vulnerable today. We're going to talk about this. And so for those of you that are watching today, what we would like to do is I would like you, in the privacy of your own, wherever you might be, in your bedroom, in your home, don't worry whether your cat is watching you. Elaine, I'm going to ask you questions. You and I are both going to respond. we realize that over 7 billion people have the potential of seeing this broadcast at some point. And so I'm going to ask you some questions. And those of you that are out there, you can kind of silently raise your hand to whether you have felt any of these feelings that we're going to share right now. Are you ready, Elaine?
Yeah, let's go for it.
So here we go. Question number one. Again, you don't have to respond out there, but I want you to ask yourself internally, have you ever felt these feelings? Here we go. Number one, have you ever felt depressed and or alone? Okay, I think both of us could raise our hands there. And
I'm raising my feet here.
Okay. Raise all of your toes as well. All right, so let me ask you the next question. Have you ever beaten yourself up for a mistake that you had made? And I think we can say that. And I know there are mistakes in my life that you couldn't pay me $1 million to reveal them just because they're so personal. But certainly we've all experienced that. Another question, and again, those of you that are watching, be thinking about these. Have you ever questioned your abilities as a teacher, as a language learner, as a parent? Right? Okay, I see you're shaking your head. All right. I can see
everything.
You're raising your toes again. All right. Yeah. Have you ever felt misunderstood or misjudged by others around you? Okay. Family, friends, colleagues, and so forth. Yes. Right. Have you ever felt anxious about your future?
Definitely. Especially
now. Are your
now.
hands getting tired?
Yeah, I'm just going to keep them up, I'm just gonna
right. And next, have you ever felt hopeless about a situation in your life? I think we've all felt that. Have you ever held an opinion, but later realized that you were wrong, that you have to acknowledge, my previous opinion is wrong? Right? Good. Have you ever wanted someone to sit with you during a traumatic time of your life and just listen to your feelings without judgment, without advice, without telling you what to do? Yeah. I think that's true. All right. And another thought, have you ever hidden your true, authentic self from others? Your feelings, your opinions, your beliefs for fear of rejection or of just not belonging, feeling that you're just not a part of that particular group?
Most certainly.
Okay. Have you ever been afraid of trying difficult things and failing miserably at them? I mean, where you're saying, I'd like to try something new. You know what? I think if we could say, have you ever been afraid of trying a difficult thing? Many of us will say, no. But if you knew the potential of failing miserably, then that might influence our choice right there. Yeah. Have you ever questioned your abilities as a parent?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I still do.
Now, some of you might say, I'm not a parent, but maybe as a child, as a student, perhaps many people have felt that way. Have you ever had any of if you've had any of these feelings, how are you able to get through these difficult moments? And that is what we're going to talk about today, I think, in more detail. Again, as I'm looking at some of the comments, again, people are just saying hello. Oh, Layla says, I think hands up during the podcast. Thank you, Layla. And I think a lot of us will feel that, a continual hands up. Again, we have Olivia from Brazil saying hello, and Elaine, very beautiful. Again, people are just, I think, beautiful heart, beautiful people. And I think that's what we're trying to, highlight is some of the beauty, even in the midst of challenges that we are experiencing. So let's go ahead, Elaine. We were having hands up. You can't see, but right now I'm wearing shorts and I have no socks on. So I'm raising all of my toes as well. So let's actually talk about some of these things and what we're going to be doing throughout the broadcast. For those of you, I've selected a number of quotes. We would like to explore these quotes and once again, hear of your experiences. Do you have any favorite quotes? Have you ever had any of these feelings? What were you able to do? Again, as we see here, get through these difficult moments. Yeah. And that's what we're going to explore. And if I go back to some of the ideas I said right from the beginning, is having the courage to learn and grow. And one of the things that I mentioned is having vulnerability authenticity. And when we do that, we can experience true belonging. So here we go, Elaine. Here we go. Number one is true learning is knowing that you know nothing. True learning is knowing that you know nothing. So let me ask you, and one of the things I want to point out is hopefully throughout the broadcast, we'll talk about validating the struggles of others and inspiring others to live, especially inspiring others to live meaningful lives for others. How does this quote resonate with you?
Wow, this is the story of my life, maybe. As we've been talking previously, I was a teenager who thought knew all kinds of things. I know that's a particular characteristic for teenagers, but I was one of the worst of them, because I didn't think I knew it all. I was sure about it, and I made 100 mistakes. Some of them were just this tiny small, and I broke my mom's heart many times because of that. But the worst mistake I made, and then opening up something personal here, not professional, was thinking I was ready to get married at the age of 16. And that was not a very good idea. And the worst idea I had after that was having kids, right? Even though they were my sunshine, as I told you guys, it wasn't a very wise decision raising kids and having a family at the age of 16. I was supposed to be doing something else in life. So even though that was my dream at the time, I thought I was very sure about it. And then I realized I knew nothing about parenting or having a family or being a wife, or nothing about myself. And after I realized I really didn't know anything, my life became much easier, right? I just started listening to people and started listening to people's opinions, and not only to follow people's advice, because when you listen to advice, you don't need to follow what people say, but you need to come up with your own conclusions. You need at least to think about it. And that was something I wasn't really used to doing. So I really struggled a lot.
And I appreciate you sharing that. When I think about the quote, true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. At least as a parent, I think there have been, still are times where I'm doing a lot better than I am, or I might be talking to my kids. You know what? I've really improved on listening, and my kids might say, "No, Dad, you're not there yet. You're not there yet." And so having that true wisdom of knowing, and I think as you mentioned, Elaine, when I was 21, I knew everything, and now I'm in my my 50s, and I know nothing, still growing. But I want to also think about this idea is dismantling outdated notions about others. I know there have been times in my life where I felt that I held certain biases, certain prejudice, maybe that were hidden beyond my awareness, that slowly, as I began to learn about people, about certain groups, about certain cultures, that I realized, and I had to acknowledge that some of the biases or prejudices that I had, whether they were about age, whether they were about sexual orientation, whether they were about race and so forth, knowing that I could be unaware of how unaware I really was, really opened my eyes.
Yeah, perfectly. And as we were talking previously, sometimes they're not groups at all. Sometimes we group people together because of something we believe, but they're not even a group, right? So that's crazy to think of, because we know nothing about ourselves. How can we believe we're able to know and judge and group other people, right? That's crazy.
Yeah, and I think a couple of comments that are coming in as well. Layla mentioned, the more you learn, the more you realize you know nothing.
Yeah,
absolutely. And again, I don't know if you've ever experienced this in the classroom, is that and I've shared this before, students ask a question. They ask me, what is the difference between lay and lie? Like, I want to lay down, I want to lie down. And I'm really thinking, I absolutely have no idea, but there's no way I'm going to acknowledge I have no idea. And I think being open to that. Edda says, as Rumi said yesterday, I'm not sure, I thought I was clever and I wanted to change the world. Today, I am wiser and I'm trying to change myself.
Beautiful.
And I think that is, and I think when I talk about pain, right from the beginning, we talked about the idea of having courage to do different things. Again, going back to the topic of motivating hearts and minds, that includes my mind of changing and reframing. And sometimes that can be very painful when you have to acknowledge, you know what? I was wrong.
Yeah.
I was wrong. All
Yeah.
right. All right. Well, good. Let's just then go on to the next idea if we can. And this brings us up to the next quote. And the next quote is, when I think about this and I think about the ideas of the best teachers are those who show you where to look, but don't tell you what to see. How is that related to as a parent, as a friend, as a teacher, and so forth for you?
Yeah, that's beautiful, right? Because here we're not talking about teachers, just the professionals, right? We at some point in life, everyone is a teacher. Either you teach your children something, or your pets, or a coworker. And when you realize that you can't show them all, you can't just give them all the information, you can't just give them everything you've got, and even if you do, maybe they will understand it differently, right? So teaching, or it's not about giving people information or knowledge, it's showing directions, right? And the more you're able to show the direction and show the way people should go, they will find their own paths, and maybe they will outgrow you, and you got to be ready for that, right? Because they might really learn their lesson, and then they might outgrow you, and that's beautiful, right? You were there at some point. You were their teacher. You made it possible, so it's beautiful too.
And it should be. I mean, you mentioned in looking at the picture of you and your family, your kids are outgrowing you physically. But one of the things that you mentioned, I think it can be a scary thing where the learner surpasses the master.
Yeah.
And when my children, as my daughter was growing up, she was probably maybe 8 or 9 years old. She used to come to me for help with her homework. And then one day she realized, my dad doesn't have it anymore. I'm not going to ask him any more questions about math because he has no concept of what I'm studying in school. And that was kind of a frightening thing where you're feeling displaced.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I go through that a lot, not only with my kids at school, but in life, right? When they come up to me and they ask me some questions, and I say, look, I have no idea why. We're just gonna have to go through this together, right? But it's beautiful, you know. And one of the things I've learned now as a professional, going through this difficult moment, not of the pandemic, but going through difficult moments in which I wasn't taught, I wasn't guided as I would like to be, right? It's crazy because nowadays we have, I think that we're kind of addicted to 10 steps to success, 7 ways of doing this, 5 ways to master whatever. We're used to being taken by the hand and guided, you know, through a certain path. And when I was working at English courses, maybe because of the fact that I have lived in the US and I have always been a very dedicated student, I have achieved a very nice level of proficiency at English. And that caused a little, insecurity on the other professionals. And I know that many times I wasn't given or told the complete information I could have. And well, that's terrible. But in another way, I got something good from it. First thing is how not to be. I can't avoid. I mean, if someone is meant to grow, that person will grow with or without your help. And I think it's much better for that person to grow with your help, and you being the little part of that huge history that it might become. And the second thing I've learned is that I can learn by myself. I can really learn. I learned how to learn. I learned how to seek information. I learned how to overcome my fears, my difficulties without much help. And sometimes with, having to fight against some kind of situations that were not very positive at work. So I've learned so much from this, so much. So what can I say, right? Teaching and showing the path is a road of no return, right? You just get into it, and when then you open that door for that person will go and grow, and that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And I think it's very beautiful, especially when you realize at times, perhaps in the past, we were wrong on a certain idea, concept, opinion, and then new growth allows us to move forward. And this is what we're going to talk about in a minute. Let's look at a couple of comments that come in. Carolina, thank you. I think we're sharing our feelings and thoughts with you, and we appreciate it, Carolina. Layla says more. I think I mentioned this, the idea of realizing your understanding, and thank you, Layla, is being better and better even from your kids or your students. Thank you, Layla. The idea of learning and being open, as we just said, having the courage to say, you know what, maybe your pronunciation is better than mine. And I think there are teachers around the world that have that fear. What if my students surpass me? And how can we understand that? Jesus says, here in my city of Santa Cruz, Bolivia, we say, give someone a fish and you will feed them a day. Teach them someone how to catch a fish and you will eat every day. And again, that's something that we're talking about. And again, Layla says, you're a wonderful teacher. So let's get in. So we've looked at those ideas. Let's move on to the next idea of personal growth. A mind that is stretched by a new experience. Now, this could be a positive experience or a very difficult one. Can never go back to its old dimensions. What do you think that relates to? I mean, and perhaps we could tie that into what is one thing you've learned during the past year that you didn't know before. Any thoughts on that, Elaine?
Many. Wow. This is one of my favorite quotes we've looked through because I'm talking about my personal experience really because growing up, I grew up in a very strict family, and I had no option but to think like them, to think like my parents, and to do whatever I was told to do, and to follow that kind of mindset or way of thinking. And when I growing up, it was really easy because I just did what my parents wanted to, and that was it. But then as I became an adult, as I told you guys, I had to become an adult much faster than other people did. I just realized that some of my concepts were not good. Well, they might be good to someone else, but not for me. They didn't make sense to who I was, and I was trying to fit into a possibility that wasn't true or wasn't mine. So coming out of that and then outgrowing what my family believed, and then what most of my friends at the time believed, and what most of my community believed, it was really hard because on one hand, I had my personal growth, and it felt great, and it felt awesome to be to become the person who I really wanted to be with my thoughts and my achievements. But on the other hand, there was loss. I was losing respect from the community that I belonged to, because in that community, they respected the people who thought like my parents, so, and I didn't anymore, and I couldn't, and there was no going back. So this is perfect. You never grow back to its old dimension. So this exchange we're having here, we have people from Egypt, from Tunisia, from Bolivia, so many places I've never dreamt of being, and we're here sharing, and you guys are sharing your experiences, and I'm sharing mine. And like when this broadcast is done, I'm not going to be the same person I was before, and this is incredible. But then there are losses, right? You got to be ready to lose something. Maybe you're not going to belong to that group you used to, or maybe you're not going to be seen by your family or your relatives, or some of the people that you thought cared about you. They're not going to see you the same way. But well, that's part of the process, right? Every step forward, and this is another quote, Randall. Every step we take forward, we leave something behind, right? Sometimes
And
you
I
got to
think
leave
this
some
is
things
going to be
behind.
I think this is going to be tied to our next point. But one of the things, as you talked about growth, and at least for me, there have been a number of times where I've spoken with different teachers from around the world. Recently, we did a broadcast on Ramadan, and I think my hope was it gave viewers around the world opportunities to see people of different faith traditions living out their beliefs in a meaningful way, so that
Yeah.
hopefully, going back to the idea, maybe I had a certain view of a particular group, whether it be related to age or, as I mentioned, religion or whatever it might be. Some of us often, sometimes beyond our awareness, hold certain uh, prejudices or certain biases. But once we start learning more about people, our minds expand. And it's kind
Yeah.
of like with my old self, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's like I've
No
grown and
way.
I've learned and so forth. And I think that's
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
Coming in, there is another comment that's come in. Jose says, one good positive aspect of this pandemic is that it's made most teachers learn new ways of teaching online. We
Yeah.
were so used to teaching in the same classroom with the same strategies, with the same technologies, with the same,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden we find ourselves teaching so differently that we're getting used to it. And again, once our mind has been expanded by a new idea, and this could be related to technology, I think there are a lot of teachers that are not going to go back to some of the things and the ways that they did it. And
Definitely.
Junior says, pandemic has taught us how to be better people, better persons. Absolutely. All right. And again, you mentioned sometimes that growth is not without pain.
Yeah.
It comes with a
No
lot
pain,
of,
no gain.
right. Great. So let's now then go on to the next idea, because I think the next idea is deeply connected to this one. And the next idea is about listening and empathy. And let me actually, I want to go over, I'm going to come back to that, talking about belonging, and then we're going to step back to that. And you mentioned, you made a really good point. You were talking about as your own thoughts and feelings and desires have evolved, sometimes the feeling of belonging. And again, there is a difference between fitting in, doing what you need to do to be accepted by the group, and
Yeah.
truly belonging is the ability to show up just as you are. The idea of when you get to a place where you understand that love and belonging, your worthiness is a birthright and not something you have to earn. Everything is possible. Could you speak to some of those ideas about
Yeah.
belonging?
Most certainly. It's really hard. It's been hard for me as a teacher and as a person, really, in my personal life, and as a teacher. As a teacher, it has been hard to understand that I don't. Exactly what Randall said right now. I did some things, and I used to do some things just to fit in, but I didn't feel that I belonged to a certain place. Usually, I didn't feel I belonged to a certain community of English teachers. Learning a foreign language is something rather expensive. So, especially here in Brazil, English teachers or foreign language teachers are people who are, if not wealthy, well, they have a very nice financial condition because usually they started learning at young age and their parents could afford interchange or something like that. But then that was not my reality. I was, I'm completely different from that group. I came from struggle. I was really lucky and blessed to be able to live in the US where I learned English. And then I came back to Brazil and I did the opposite way, right? I learned English and then I got specialized. Most of the people here in Brazil, they learn English, they study English at very expensive course, and then they go abroad. I did the opposite way, and I was lucky. I didn't go abroad because my family could afford it. I went abroad because my father worked for the military, and he went on a mission, a 2-year mission to the US. So that's it. So my family is like broke, and I was not. I am still not the kind of standard English teacher here in my country. So I tried to fit in, but I felt I didn't belong. But now I feel that I belong in my own particular way. How I can add, I feel that I can add. I can, whenever people talk to me and say, wow, you really struggled through it. And they say, yeah, kind of. It was not as easy as it was for other teachers. I'm not saying that it's a piece of cake. I'm sorry, guys. But I'm just saying that some people really can afford things I couldn't. And it was really interesting. And as a person also, the feeling of belonging, as I told you guys, when I said, okay, I found myself as someone completely different from who I was in my teens, in my childhood, in the community I was set in with my parents. I felt I was just expelled and put out from that community, and then I didn't belong. And then I had to find my way into belonging into the community. I really feel that I am. That I should be, and not because I've earned the right to be there, but it's natural, people and where you belong, they would just embrace you. But once you really assume and respect your beliefs and thoughts, and this is so hard to be done nowadays. Don't you think so, Randall? So many keyboard warriors and internet police on you saying you should do this, you shouldn't do that, and it's so hard to step out of that, break out and say, no, I should do whatever I should, not whatever people think, right?
And that's sometimes extremely difficult. And certainly Elaine and I would be interested in hearing from any of you the feelings of belonging.
Yeah.
Have there ever been times where you felt that you had to just fit in, because if you showed up as your real true self, how people might reject you? And I know there have been times where I've spoken on vulnerability and courage at different conferences with teachers, and teachers come up to me privately after a presentation and share their part of the story. And they say, but I can't show up as my true self at work because of the experiences I've had, because I don't want people to see me as broken. That I don't want them to see me. And this is kind of goes back to this idea of fear, of you feeling helpless, deficient. I've had teachers say to me, you know what, if I tell some of my my colleagues some of my struggles, they're not going to have that high respect, because we have to show, come from a position of strength. We have to show that we're not afraid. And I know that I've shared before with you and with others, talking about my son, Josh, who died by suicide. And I shared that, I think, in an appropriate way to teachers about the struggles of people. And I've had teachers say to me, you know what, I struggle as well, but there is no way at all I'm ever going to share that with anyone that I know. I can't show up. And we're talking about tasteful authenticity of sharing what we feel would be important. But again, I think a lot of people are just afraid, because if they show up as their true self, will they actually feel that they can belong?
Exactly, right. And then it's very miserable to live like that, because I've experienced that, and I've lived miserably for years, just hiding myself from what I was. And I thought, okay, I might lose my job, I might lose respect, I might lose this and that. And in reality, all that happened was that I gained a lot of things, but I wasn't ready to understand that back then. And when I really decided to go for it and trust my feelings and go for what I believed, those have been the best years of my life.
Yeah. And even related to teaching, if you have a teacher saying, you know, I know the rest of my colleagues have this particular approach, I would like to try something new. I'd like to show up and try it without someone dismissing my thoughts, without giving that a try. And that's probably going to be connected to what we're doing right now in a minute, an idea. Layla also mentions, when you meet people from different countries with different ways of life, different thoughts, you can clearly see that there's a lot of common points.
Yeah.
And I think that's important too. I've had students that have come into the classroom. For example, I've had students from many Muslim countries who are not sure to what degree they will fit in. They have some uncertainty here where I live. And once they realize, you know what, a lot of people have a common belief and strength in helping one
Yeah.
another. And at least in our particular program, we have a room it's a prayer room for those that
Nice.
would like to, practice their beliefs as part, outside of the classroom, in a special room in our institute. So again, as Layla's talking about, when we get up close and we look carefully, we're not all that different.
Not at all.
Another Jose says how hard it was to learn English 16 years ago in a family where the language was not spoken, with economic limitations. And the more struggles I went through, the more ambitious I felt to
Nice.
try and do things. So again, thank you for sharing that as well. Well, let's go on to the next idea. We've talked about fear, but let's talk about the power of listening and empathy. And one of my favorite quotes is right here. Let me actually there. This is actually by a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, and he says, Thich Nhat Hanh, he says, you can practice deep listening. Now, we just talked about struggle. We talked about fitting in. We've talked about belonging. And when you yearn for that, you're yearning for people to hear you. And he says, you can practice deep listening in order to relieve the suffering in us and in the other person. And that kind of listening is described as compassionate listening. You listen, only for the purpose of relieving suffering in the other person. In other words, you allow people to suffer less. So in what ways has the listening, perhaps the power of listening for you, been important in your life, related to some of the things we've talked about or other?
Yeah, listening is something that I need to work on. Even though many people say I'm a good friend, I need to work on listening. And sometimes, for me myself, I've chosen therapy really with psychological help because unfortunately we know that this kind of compassionate listening, it's not very common to happen, right? People want to hear you, but either they want to know information about you, or they will just give you their own advice, or tell you not to feel that way because you've got right things. They'll try to cheer you up, but honestly, sometimes you just need to be heard. You just need to bring all that stuff out. So, as I had no one I could do that to, I've been going. I've been taking really appointments with a therapist, and then I'm able to talk without being judged. And this is so important, and this is something I have to practice more and improve at that, at improving my compassionate listening to others. Right? And I think all of us can. It's really, really important, especially nowadays. We feel that we're so connected. We have this, we're here on Facebook, right? And then we have this feeling of, oh, we've got so many friends. Look at how many friends I've got. I got 500, 1,000, 2,000 friends. And then when we're struggling, and when you're under the shower crying, there's no one to hear you. When, no one's there. And sometimes you find out you're all alone. So we all need to practice, I think, and improve our compassionate listening without judgment, without, just really listening to the person and just try to be there, to be an ear, like as it says, lend an ear, right? When you lend an ear, you don't say what's going to be said, what's going to be done with that ear. You just lend it, right? So that's what we're supposed to do, I think. And I need to improve that myself.
And I think when I talk about empathy, and you talked about listening, and you talked about, I have all of these Facebook friends, but when I really need them, they're not there. They simply disappear. Yeah. And I think one reason could be is that I think empathy is very tribal in nature, in that if we have shared experiences, right, that we can relate to, it's much easier to step in discomfort and connect with that person. And one example, we have a friend who's had a family member that passed away, and this friend opened his home to neighbors, had all kinds of food, but was wondering, no one showed up. No one came, and he was struggling. He was trying to think, why are people not showing up? And I said, it's not about people not wanting to show up. It's they just unfortunately don't have the skill set to do so. In other words, they have never had that experience. When our son died by suicide, there were some people that just went silent, not because they didn't love us and our son, but they just didn't know what to say. And in many cases, I would prefer someone to say something. So when I see someone that doesn't show up, like I'm a teacher and I'm struggling with my students and I have no idea. And again, it could be a very deep struggle, a personal struggle. Teachers tend to show up when they have that shared experience, and unfortunately sometimes use competing sympathies. I know how you feel. I've been through that. But the reality is every experience is unique. And so sometimes, like when my mother passed away, and everyone was saying to my father, she's in a better place, my father said, that's not what I need to hear right now. I just want people to say, this is hard. I just can't imagine, rather than saying, I know how you feel. If we acknowledge, I absolutely have no idea how you feel, I think that's more a better and more compassionate framework to deal with such situations.
Yeah.
Great. A couple of ideas that are coming in here, a comment. You can share your feelings with your circle. Not everyone is trustworthy. I think absolutely. You have to earn the right to hear that. You have to cope with circumstances, be self-confident, and have your feet on the ground, especially when your feet have been taken out from under you. There are some people who find pleasure in dwarfing others. And I think, if I understand, sometimes when you are in a position of doing well and someone else is suffering, sometimes we say, well, that's not me. I'm glad that's not me, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Another one, Edna says, it is sometimes difficult to find someone who listens to you without judgment. Right. Any thought on that? I know we've been talking about that idea.
Yeah, most certainly. And then when I think about that, I think, am I able to listen without judging? So when I think about that, it's so hard. I try to work on myself so I can be that person to someone,
Yeah, and I think that's really, really hard to do that. Another comment, Layla says, I think in general, good listeners are not a big confessor. They help others, but they don't ask for help. So sometimes there are many situations where we try to be good listeners. We don't know what to say. We sometimes maybe say the wrong thing. There can be difficult situations there. And Tudor Joe from Costa Rica says, it was in the middle of the 1970s, and there was not as many options as today to learn a language. I used to read newspapers, listening to music, try to catch old songs, no matter our limitations. When we really want to do it, you'll be able to pass over any obstacle. And that could be any obstacle. Tudor Joe's speaking about language learning. And this leads into our next point. It is this one. And thank you, Tudor Joe, for sharing that. And this next point is this, one of my favorite quotes. So we have all of this adversity and expecting, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Elaine. Life's not fair. Life sucks. Right? Why is this happening to me?
To me, I'm such a good person.
Right. And expecting the world to treat you fairly because you're a good person is like expecting a bull not to attack you because you're a vegetarian. Any thought on that, Elaine?
Most certainly. Yeah, I love this quote because it happened to me a lot. I was just like, I'm such a good person. I would never do the same to anyone. Why are people treating me like this? Why is this happening to me? Why is that? Why? But people don't know. That's what sometimes we don't realize is that people don't know. People don't know us. people, I mean, people will never know us as well as we know ourselves, especially because sometimes we're struggling to get to know ourselves. So how can we expect people know we are who we are? So the world doesn't know you're good. You're just another person. So I was just another teacher. I was just another friend. I was just another, religious person at church. So sometimes I was treated unfair in an unfair way, but people didn't know. So it wasn't fair to my point of view because I knew who I was, but then it's just not. People don't know. Like the bull doesn't know you're a vegetarian. So it's just trying to defend itself. So sometimes people strike first. And sometimes we're just so pitiful about ourselves. Oh, why is this happening to me? But then what we don't realize is that sometimes the person who is attacking the person, the situation, the institution, who is attacking us first is even more afraid and more fearful than we are. Like the bull. The bull only looks at a person and sees a threat, doesn't see anything beyond that. So sometimes we need to be a little bit more compassionate to people who harm us. I know this is hard. I'm not a nun. I'm not, I'm not a monk. I'm not able to do that like 100% of the time, but just being aware of it. And then it's what we talked about previously. You can't fit in your old mind. So I can't, after I started having this point of view, I can't go back to who I was. And now when somebody harms me or does me something bad or wrong, I cannot help but to think, what is that person going through? What caused this person or this institution or whatever to do that to me? Why is that so? And then I step out of that pitiful place of just being, oh, I'm so sorry for myself, and being like, oh my gosh, maybe I should be sorry for the other person. Maybe I should be the one helping and not the one who needs help. So and we grow so much stronger as we start to think like that.
Right. And I think that as we think about that as well, this kind of leads into the next one. Again, life is not fair. I wish it were fair.
Yeah,
So when you
yeah.
find yourself in the arena with that bull or with any other challenging experience, what do you do? And one of my favorite thoughts that's related to this is a comfort zone is the most dangerous area anyone can stay in. It is a place of no growth and no challenges. And how is that related to some of the things that we've talked about today, Elaine? Again, sometimes not challenging your own biases, your own thoughts, your own opinions, your own teaching techniques. How is that more comfortable, but yet more dangerous? It's not a place of growth and challenge. Anything on that?
Yeah, of course. As we've been talking, when we find ourselves being a little bit different than what we were, sometimes we're gonna lose some things. We're gonna have to give up on some things also as well. Not only lose, right? But that's the only way to grow, right? How does the butterfly become a beautiful butterfly? That's the oldest comparison in the face of Earth, but that's the truth, right? The butterfly needs to stop being what it is. It needs to encapsulate itself for a while and then come out as a beautiful, lovely butterfly, which everyone likes. So we need to step out of our comfort zone, and sometimes we're confronted with that. Like someone mentioned here that the pandemic just came up and gave us a reality shock. And hello, what are you guys doing? What have you guys been doing? Because it's very prestigious to be a teacher, and then we just come in the room and we have our books, and the student gives us an apple, and then we're like with all the knowledge and everything. And right now we were the learners. We had not only to learn how to teach, but how to deal with technology. And so many of us had to deal with financial struggles as well. We've talked about in previous broadcasts, right, Randall, about how to deal with that. I mean, not all of us had the cash to buy equipment, and we weren't financed by anyone. So we had to struggle with little equipment, little knowledge, little everything, and how we go through this. But right now, a year later, we look back and we say, wow, Nice. I wouldn't have all this knowledge if it weren't for the pandemic. So I know the pandemic is a terrible moment. I myself lost my grandmother because of it. So it was a very painful moment to me. But I cannot look back and only see bad things. Pandemic
Right.
pushed me through out of my comfort zone, and in which I was already an online teacher. So I already taught online exclusively. But now I have more competition. How can I be better? Because before it was me and, half a dozen teachers. Now the whole world's online. How can I become better? How can I be different? What can I offer? So stepping out of our comfort zone is hard. It's dangerous. There will be losses, and there will be some things you need to give up on. But hey, how nice would it be if we just stayed in the same place forever?
And I think this is connected also to some of the things we talked about belonging, about listening, about empathy, is that generally, for example, when you're climbing, you're doing that with someone else. All right. You're connected.
Yeah.
And I think having that connectivity, I think, is so important. And this leads to the last of the couple quotes I'd like to share today. Again, the idea of smooth seas do not make skilled sailors, right? A ship is safe in a harbor, but that's not what it was meant for. Is stepping beyond our abilities, I think, is really, really important. We have a quote coming. Jesus says, what a nice quote. Nobody is a prophet in their own land. Sometimes I feel like my own students are not enjoying the activities in class. So I know I got to change them, right? Maybe I need to evolve. You will never please them all, but that can help us do things differently and more challenging the next time. Thank you, Jesus, for sharing that idea. Great idea. Layla says, we are supposed to put ourselves in other people's sides to understand them better, in their own shoes, you could say. And the more that we challenge, that we have challenges, these challenges give us strength to go on and change the situation to be better. But I think we're still interconnected, right? We're still that empathy, that listening, and so forth, I think is really important. And Shamin says, blaming ourselves will not help us get out of the problem, but we should seek for solutions from other experienced people, knowing once again that we're interconnected.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about a lot of different ideas. We've talked about having courage. We're talking about vulnerability. We've talked about listening. We've talked about empathy. You and I have been a little bit vulnerable in sharing some of our stories of our lives. And the last thing I would like to share today, two more ideas, is one, the idea of daring greatly. And this is one of my favorite books I've shared earlier. And just for everyone to know, all of the quotes that we have shared are in the show notes that you can see on Facebook. And one of my favorite books is right here. It's called Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, Daring Greatly. And the idea is 20 years from now, this doesn't come from her book, but from Mark Twain. He says, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the things that you did do. So sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, a dream, and discover. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to say. And it might be connecting with you. What is one dream that you have for your future, Elaine?
Yeah, definitely. My greatest fear is not achieving this dream. I'm a pet lover. I'm an animal lover. So I think that my dream is to have this not exactly a dog pound, but a rescue pound, to get dogs from the streets and financing it myself. This is my biggest dream, and as I grow older, I'm so afraid I cannot achieve that dream, and that is also my biggest fear, that I do not accomplish what I was meant to do here in this planet, let's say. I'm working on it, and then it's interesting because it has nothing to do with my profession or my family or anything, but here I am being vulnerable and sharing with you guys something that maybe you might expect me to say, oh, I would love to develop my own course or my book or bring up or something like that. I would love to do these things as well, but that's not my greatest dream.
Yeah. But I think also in addition to that idea, and you should come to Utah, there is a place called Best Friends Animal Sanctuary. Look that up. Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, where they have all of these homeless pets that they have brought together into a sanctuary where people can adopt them. That's another talk for another day.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is I'd like to finish up by talking about something that I think is important to everyone that is watching today. And this goes back to the picture you showed of you and your family, about the dreams that you have for them, because I think at the core of who we are and what we want to achieve is centered in our relationships with our family. And what I would like to share is the last thought. This is actually a recent adventure that I went on. It's a place called Goblin Valley. And when anyone looks at Goblin Valley, it looks like Mars. It's like a whole, it has so many sandstone formations. It looks like you're walking on another planet. And I'm with my grandson, and this is one of the most meaningful pictures for me. It's because for him, he's embracing me. He's accepting me just the way I am. And one of my favorite quotes, it says, at the end of your life, you will never regret not having passed one more test, not winning one more verdict, or not closing one more deal. You will regret time not spent with a husband, with a spouse, with a partner, with a friend, with a child, or a parent. And when I think in conjunction with that idea is I think of this. Mother Teresa said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And when I feel deeply in distress, when I find a feeling of loss and so forth, often the courage comes from the family relationships that we have. And I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts about family, about how they are at the core of helping you in difficult situations.
Yeah, most certainly. My children, I usually tell them that they were the biggest mistake I made, but they are my compass through life. So now I understand why they had to come to my life, because they're really my compass. They're my balance, really. And about spending time with your family, I've told you guys I've lost my grandmother last year due to COVID complications, and I hadn't seen my grandmother for, I don't know, maybe 2 years. Oh. So now I can't see her ever again because I was busy. I was working. I was taking care of my kids. And now I can't. So this means a lot. This speaks to me very deeply because now I can't anymore. And what's really important, what really matters, so do what matters the most first, and the rest comes up, right?
And thank you for sharing that, Elaine. I've seen some other comments, people saying they've been comforted by some of the things that we've shared.
Nice.
Stefan says being vulnerable takes heaps of courage.
Yeah,
absolutely. And as I've talked about, sometimes we wear a mask of inauthenticity until we've earned the right to hear other stories. And Jesus says, absolutely agree with the comfort zone quote. If you don't want to go to another level of success, you just have to stay there where you are. That's my case. It's not so easy to take your own burden a mile away, but we have to do it to experience a new dimension. And I appreciate that, Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everyone. And thank you, Elaine, for joining us on this broadcast, talking about motivating our hearts and minds during difficult times. We certainly would encourage everyone with any of the quotes that we shared. And again, those quotes are in the show notes on Facebook, is that reach out, touch someone, connect on a deeper level so that people can have the courage in difficult times.
Yeah.
So we want to, again, thank you very much for joining us, for sharing your voices, because that's what makes the world what it is. And we want to wish you a wonderful day and an even better tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.